Well, happening today, the UN holding a closed-door meeting about the Syrian chemical attack after President Trump issued a stern warning to Russia, telling them to get ready for an attack. So was he right to stand up to Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is seen as complicit in these deadly chemical attacks? Here now to weigh in is Iraq War veteran Chris Weiweem. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Good morning, Heather.
So was the president right in his response to Russia?
Yes, I mean, the president is very strong. He wants to send strong messages, and he knows that President Obama's red line meant nothing. It meant nothing. And so he wants to challenge Russia where he can, and I think he was right to do that. You know,
satellite imagery I was reading, it shows that 11 Russian warships, including a submarine, they have left a port in Syria. What does that tell you, if anything, about what they may or may not be planning?
Well, they're just trying to position themselves. I mean, they've obviously backed the Syrian government, which has continued to massacre their own people for years. Peace talks and iterations of peace talks that have taken place over the last several years have gone nowhere, and actually attacks on resistance and citizens occurred during those talks. So that stuff doesn't seem to work. So the U.S. role is probably going to have to be more clear here.
Yeah, we talked about this closed-door UN Security Council briefing. The Trump administration, they are actually still trying to do this possible joint military attack, or military response, I should say, between France and the U.K. What about that? Is that a good idea? Is that something that we need to do different this time around?
Well, I think it's going to need to be, it might need to be a little more sustained. They're going to be looking at targets that can launch these attacks and try to make sure we diminish those things. We know that Russia and Syria are trying to move planes in preparation for the attack because they know it's coming. But obviously it's going to have to be hard and maybe be another hit after that, enough to make the government stop doing what it's doing.
Yeah, Russia also saying that they're monitoring the U.S. response so far, including the USS Harry Truman, the strike force that just deployed, also a submarine from the U.S. as well. Does it concern you, these harsh words or these almost threats going back and forth between the countries?
No, not really. That's to be expected. We just are finally seeing a commander-in-chief that's tough and that wants to get something done over there right. And he's also, it's a very difficult situation because we don't want to be in there for perpetuity, but we don't want the situation and conditions to be worse and not do anything. I think the National Security Council's meeting today. Yeah. I would predict there'd be a strike over the weekend on this timeline, but we're still kind of waiting to see how those negotiations work out with UK and France and the U.S.
What about diplomacy? Are we past diplomacy at this point?
I think diplomacy is going to continue, but it just never works. You know, it never works when it comes to these things happening. The meetings are going on, the UN meetings, and the inspectors that can't get in, can't do anything. And Assad's the kind of guy that just needs to get knocked out and knocked out hard. What
about Mattis, who said yesterday that we're actually still looking into or studying the intelligence on the attack?
Right, and I think they're going to continue to do that. I mean, I know that the UK will probably be looking at more expedited military authority over the weekend, as you can't necessarily wait for everything to authorize some of these flexibilities. But I think they're going to work. They're going to calibrate this. Diplomacy will go on, but we've got to see response and compliance over there, and we got to do something about it.
The Syrian government, as to be expected, is still denying that they in fact launched the chemical attack. Some of the news headlines insinuating that Mattis making that statement meant that we're still actually investigating, trying to see who actually did the attack. But we know that Syria has done this before. We know that before President Trump himself, he launched, 59 Tomahawk missiles the last time around. Looking at these images, I mean, it breaks your heart, these little children and families dealing with this.
Oh, it's a total disaster. It's tragic. I mean, we want to make sure we're not getting caught in a conflict in perpetuity, but if every time somebody protested the president in this country, the government killed a bunch of people, it would be an absolute outrage. I mean, people would start paying more attention, and that's exactly what's happening in Syria, and it's continued to happen. But President Trump, his red line's not going to mean nothing. So,
very good point to end it on. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.